Welcome to Part 3 of the Darling Downs and South West Regional Development Authority's Framework for Growing a Livable Region. In Part 3, we'll discuss the impacts of significant regional trends. Australia is one of the most urbanised countries in the world, with over 75% of its population living in urban areas. Yet the state of Queensland is one of Australia's most regionally dispersed states. In Queensland there are 73 local government areas in a state of approximately 4.5 million people. Yet as you can see from this graph, most of the local government areas have relatively low populations. In fact, over 50% of local government areas have less than 5,000 people. In a state with a string of growing coastal cities, it will be the adjacent local government areas that hold the key to the region's future livability. These adjacent sub-regional communities consist of 20 local government areas with populations ranging from 10 to 50,000 people. To develop effective action plans for regional communities, it is important to use the available information in the right context. For instance, growth data can be misleading. This table reflects the average population growth of southeast Queensland. The southeast corner has averaged a 2.5% growth. And it is well reported that this growth has caused livability challenges for the people within this region. At the same time, the other regional cities in Queensland have also been growing at similar rates, and in fact have exceeded the growth rates of the southeast corner. Yet these figures can disguise what is really happening at the community level. For example, within the statistical area of North Queensland, which has an average growth rate of 2.5%, in fact the communities within that statistical division have relatively uneven growth. This leads to the real paradox in sub-regional areas, where sub-regions in high-growth areas need growth stimulation rather than growth management. In the Darling Downs statistical division, which has an average of 1.2% growth in the same period, it's a 50% less growth rate than coastal regions. This table reflects the relatively strong average percentages of the adjacent regional councils around Toowoomba City. As we break those figures down into the smaller communities within those local government areas, we can see there is a very uneven approach to growth across sub-regional communities. In the case of Toowoomba Regional Council area, its communities' growth rates range from negative 0.08 to a positive 6.2%. Within the Southwest Statistical Division, growth rates are also uneven. Within the Maranoa Regional Council area, the communities are also experiencing very different approaches to growth and change. It has long been acknowledged that many sub-regional communities suffer from the lifestyle dangers of population decline, ageing population, low-income households, narrow business base, low skill levels, and a workforce too small. One of the most significant trends is the ageing of our regional communities. The State of Australian Cities report in 2010 identified that Australia's population is ageing, and by 2050, 23% of the Australian population will be over the age of 65. In 40 years' time, it will be a national issue. But in the Darling Downs and South West, this level of ageing will be achieved in 25 years. By 2031, 50% of local government areas in the Darling Downs and South West will have reached the national 2050 projections. In fact, for some communities, it will be even more critical. In 4 years' time, the community of Inglewood in Texas will, for the first time since their settlement, have more 65-year-olds than youth in their town. The biggest concern for regional livability is that ageing societies become less vibrant, and the lack of new innovation means lower productivity and growth in the future. In fact, as we age, we change our spending behaviour. Peak consumption spending is typically in the years of 45 to 50, which is typical of the family formation years. As we age, our spending on consumption reduces, and at the age of 65, our consumption spending is similar to the levels of our youth. So as communities age and their family numbers are reducing, the level of local spending reduces accordingly, to the point where the community's general spending is 50% less than it used to be. For communities with static but ageing populations, as time progresses, the local spending power diminishes. And yet, with the increasing age of the community, the capital costs of services increase. With the continuing concentration of an aged population, the only consequence can be a gradual reduction in the quality of life. In the context of ageing and spending, population growth can be an indicator of local economic vitality. But again, these figures can be misleading. The current population figures for the Darling Downs and South West local government areas indicate that 70% of the councils are experiencing growth, but a closer look at the population and spending patterns suggests that only 3 of the 10 LGAs are avoiding lifestyle decline. This is revealed by a closer look at the changes within the demographics of each local government area. For Shire, the projected demographic changes are as follows. We can use 3 key demographic areas to reveal potential social and economic trends. By looking at the over 65 age group, where spending is now at 50% of their peak levels, and we look at the 45 to 64 age group, which is the peak family spending demographic, and also look towards the 25 to 44 age group, which particularly gives us an indicator of the family formation years that lead into the peak spending years. In the case of Shire, the demographic increase of the over 65s requires an additional 30 people in the peak spending demographic. Current projections are only 8, with a reduction in the young family formation demographic of 27. When we look at Shire, the over 65 age group requires 69 additional people in the peak spending demographic. Projections are -7, with also a decline in the young family formation demographic. For Paroo Shire, the over 65 age group requires an additional 95 people in a peak spending demographic. Projections are -107, with also a decline in the family formation demographic. For Shire, the over 65 age group requires additional 137 people in a peak spending demographic. Current projections are 140, but there's also a projected decline in the family formation demographic. For Shire, the over 65 age group requires an additional 176 people in the peak spending demographic. Current projections are -15, with also declining family formation demographic. For Maranoa Regional Council area, the over 65 demographic requires an additional 301 in the peak spending demographic. Current projections are 343, with also growth in the family formation demographic. Western Downs Regional Council area requires an additional 1,606 to balance the increase in the 65 demographic. The current projection is 1,501. Goondiwindi Regional Council, the over 65 demographic requires an additional 896 in the peak spending demographic. Current projections are 447, with also a decline in the family formation demographic. Southern Downs Regional Council requires an additional 3,562 to balance the ageing population. Projections are 1,714. Toowoomba Regional Council requires an additional 14,390 in the peak spending demographic. The current projections are 18,441. In summary, a closer look at the general growth figures for the region reveal the fact that only 3 local authority areas has sustainable growth, even though 7 out of the 10 local authorities are projected to grow in population numbers. This leads us to our paradox number 3, where it could be said we need to send our young people away to save our sub-regional towns. And And what we mean by this is that the sub-regional focus for livability is clearly on family formation as the key social and economic component of sub-regional towns. In particular, the 25 to 44 family formation demographic is the critical foundation for a sustainable community. It's not the loss of the 18 to 25 demographic that is the key to the problem. The real issue is that young people return to establish and raise a family in these communities, because it is the conversion of the 25 to 44 age group to family formation that will keep businesses, schools and sport clubs open. Another indicator is the change in households that have a couple with children. All local authorities in the Darling Downs and South West region, except for Toowoomba, have experienced a decline in the couple with children households in the 2001 to 2006 years, even though the region's population figures show a general positive growth trend. This leads to paradox number 4, that regional family values grow stronger the more they disappear. Another indicator for lifestyle changes is the spread of age groups represented by the age-sex pyramid. This is the age-sex pyramid for the Darling Downs and South West region, as compared to the Queensland average. The interesting data in these pyramids is the difference between the location and the broader state trends. By highlighting where each group is either overrepresented or underrepresented with a comparison location, we can create a snapshot of key local trends, which in turn can give an insight to local spending and lifestyle. In this representation of Toowoomba Regional Council as compared to Queensland, it is clear that there's an overrepresentation in the over 55 age group at the top of the pyramid and a underrepresentation in the young family and peak spending demographics. In the lower part of the demographics, things such as the regional university and boarding schools, which are picked up in census data, can show a local distortion. By quickly scrolling through these charts, we can see how much variation there is within the 10 local government areas that consist the Darling Downs and South West RDA. Each of these charts provide strong clues to the long-term vitality and sustainability of these communities. The increased ageing of regional communities has contributed in part to paradox number 5, where regions with declining employment have no vacant housing. This is a result of the increased efficiency of the rural industry and the community to choose to age in place. There is no doubt there needs to be more local employment in regional and especially sub-regional communities, and that these jobs need to pay well enough to raise families. The current poverty line for a couple with 2 children is equivalent to $40,000 a year. This clearly means that if we are going to create jobs to provide long-term security to these communities, they need to pay well in excess of $40,000 a year. Again, it's time to focus and consolidate the insights provided by these various trends. It could be said that the foundation to change that strengthens community identity and lifestyle is well-paid local jobs for families. In this context, we need to look to the future to understand local employment opportunities, and in particular, appreciate the progressive evolution of our workforce. Well-paid jobs of the future will clearly be those that will be very different from the agricultural and industrial jobs of the past. So the key question we all should ask when we look to ensuring the sustainability of regional and sub-regional communities is your town a good place to start a business and raise a family? And more so in the context for Gen Y parents. Continue to part 4 for a discussion on place and its impact on the livability framework.